All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to explore one of Pakistan's most critical but also most threatened natural treasures, its forests. From the massive Himalayan peaks all the way down to the coast, these ecosystems are so much more than just a bunch of trees. They're basically the lifeblood of the nation. So, what would actually happen if they were gone? I mean, really think about that for a second. It's a pretty intense question, but it's one we absolutely have to ask. Just try to picture a landscape without these green guardians. What would that do to the climate, to our water supply, to millions of people? This isn't some far-off hypothetical. The threat is very real, and the stakes could not be higher. And the answer to that question, really, the heart of this whole crisis, boils down to one word: deforestation. It sounds simple, right? Cutting down trees. But it's actually a really complex and destructive process, and getting a handle on it is the first step to understanding the massive challenge Pakistan is up against. So we're going to start with the hard truth here. This isn't a problem for the future. It's a silent crisis that's happening right now all across the country, and it has these huge consequences for both the environment and the economy. But, before we get into all the problems, we really need to understand what we're talking about, what's actually at stake. So let's take a quick tour of Pakistan's incredibly diverse forests. This trip is going to show us exactly what we stand to lose. Just look at this map for a second. It shows you the incredible range of Pakistan's forests. See, they're not just one big forest, but this amazing patchwork of unique ecosystems. And each one is shaped by things like altitude, rainfall, and temperature. Let's zoom in and check out a few of the key types. First up, we've got the alpine forests. You find these way up there, above 4,000 meters in places like Chitral. These guys are true survivors. Their stunted, kind of dwarf-like growth isn't a weakness at all. It's actually a super clever adaptation to survive burying snow and insane cold. And for the local communities, these tough little trees are an absolutely essential source of fuel wood. Okay, let's move a little down the mountainside. Here, you'll find the coniferous forests. These are those classic, iconic evergreens you picture in the north. See their cone shape? That's basically nature's perfect design to just shrug off heavy snow. And that thick bark? It protects them from those bitter cold winds. They're incredibly resilient. Plus, economically, they're a huge deal. They're the main source of commercial timber for things like construction. Now, let's jump over to the plains of Punjab and Sindh. It's a much drier climate here, and this is where you find the tropical thorn forests. These plants, they are masters of survival. They have super deep roots to search for any drop of water and thorny branches to protect themselves from grazing animals. For a lot of rural communities, this is their #1 source of firewood. And right along the mighty Indus River, we find the riverine or Bella forests. Now you should think of these less like a giant forest and more like a long, thin line of trees acting as a natural shield. Their roots literally bind the soil together, stopping the river from eating away at its banks and helping to slow down floodwaters. Pretty important job, right? And finally, let's head all the way down to the coast to see the incredible mangrove forests. These are the guardians of the Indus Delta, and they have some amazing tricks up their sleeves, like special breathing roots that actually stick up out of the mud, and the ability to filter salt out of the seawater. They're a vital barrier against tsunamis and serve as a crucial nursery for fish and shrimp. So, we've seen all this amazing diversity, but why does it matter so much? Let's break down the huge value these forests really provide, because it's way more than just pretty scenery. The sources we looked at give us a good way to think about this. On one hand, you have productive forests. These are the ones we use for economic reasons. They give us timber, firewood, and even boost tourism. Then you have protective forests. Their value is all about keeping the environment stable, stopping soil from washing away, providing homes for wildlife, and controlling floods. And here's the thing, both are absolutely critical. So when you put it all together, the picture becomes crystal clear. Forests are quite literally a lifeline. They power entire industries, they create jobs, they heat homes, they build our houses, they protect farmland, they shelter countless animal species, and they actually clean the air that we all breathe. Okay, so now that we get just how valuable they are, we have to face the tough question, why are they disappearing? Let's dig into the roots of this problem. And the causes are pretty much all human-driven. There's a huge demand for firewood, especially where people don't have other fuel options. Livestock are overgrazing and eating the young saplings, so the forest can't grow back. And of course, land is always being cleared for development, for roads, housing, and industry. Then you add mining operations and uncontrolled forest fires to the mix, and you've got yourself a perfect storm of destruction. What happens next is a really dangerous chain reaction. It all kicks off the moment that protective canopy of trees is gone. Without that cover, the bare soil is just left wide open, totally exposed to the elements. And with no tree roots to hold it in place, that soil is completely vulnerable. So every time there's a heavy rain, that precious topsoil just gets washed or blown away. We're talking about soil erosion on a massive scale. So where does all that soil end up? Well, it flows straight into rivers and streams. This sediment, or silt, starts building up in our reservoirs, and it clogs up our vital dams and irrigation canals. This process is called siltation, and it's basically like a slow-motion clogging of the nation's arteries, reducing how much water the whole system can hold. And here it is, the final, devastating link in that chain. With dams that can't hold as much water and riverbeds that are now raised by all that silt, the risk of a catastrophic flood downstream goes way, way up. It's a direct line. The loss of trees way upstream leads to potential disaster for communities far, far downstream. It's a pretty grim picture, I know, but it is not the end of the story. There are very clear, very actionable steps that can be taken to start reversing this damage and bring Pakistan's forests back to life. Two key strategies are really at the heart of any solution. First, there's afforestation. That's about creating brand new forests on land that was barren before. Then there's reforestation, which is all about replanting and restoring forests that have already been cut down. You absolutely need both to rebuild the country's green cover. Look, the path forward really needs to be a multi-pronged attack. We need to get much stricter about enforcing the laws that are supposed to protect our forests. Public awareness campaigns are so important to show people why this stuff matters. Providing alternatives to firewood, like natural bass, can take a huge amount of pressure off the trees. We also need smarter forestry, like selective cutting, instead of just clear-cutting everything. And we need to set aside land specifically for new plantation. When you boil it all down, the sources point to a really powerful idea. The future of Pakistan's landscape isn't some predetermined fate. It's a choice. And the health of these vital ecosystems is going to be decided by the actions or the inaction of all of us right now. And that really leaves us with one final critical question to think about. How does a growing nation meet all the demands for new roads, new industries, and new resources, while at the same time protecting the natural heritage that keeps it alive? Finding that balance? Well, that might just be one of the greatest challenges of our time. Thanks so much for joining.